Meet Laura. The crisp air brushes against her face as she walks through the park. Piper trotting ahead, extending the leash as far as she can take it, while Laura is lost in thought, staring at the pavement as if the answers she's looking for will appear beneath her feet. 6 years. 6 years at the same insurance company doing work that drains her. She's good at it. Great at it even. Everyone tells her, Laura, you are the glue that holds everything together. Then why does she feel like she's the one unraveling? Laura sighs as Piper starts chasing a squirrel up a tree, wagging her tail with excitement. Laura hasn't felt that kind of enthusiasm in a very long time. She used to have passion, drive, a vision for what she wanted her career to be, but now she feels stuck. The best part of her week? Friday at 5 p.m. She lives for the weekend, for the escape. And when Sunday night comes, the dread creeps back in. She's thought about quitting, maybe starting something on her own, doing some consulting, finding a new job. But what if she leaves and she feels exactly the same way? What if she never finds something that she truly enjoys? That evening, Laura is sitting on the sofa, absent-mindedly scratching Piper's ears, and her phone buzzes. It's a LinkedIn notification, and it reads, "New post from Sarah Mitchell." Laura clicks it instinctively, and she sees a photo of Sarah, her former colleague, smiling ear to ear with her team. Confetti in the air, arms raised in celebration, and the caption reads, "2 years ago, I took a leap. Best decision I ever made. So proud of what we've built together." Laura feels a turning in her stomach. She stares at the photo, sees the joy in their faces, and she feels a tightness build up in her chest. And she thinks, why don't I have that? Today, I'll be speaking with Dean Craig, Business Services Director at Willamette Workforce Partnerships and host of All in a Day's Work, a podcast dedicated to helping professionals find more fulfillment and passion in their careers. Dean has years of experience in workforce development, helping countless people to break free from that stuck feeling and guiding them towards work that they actually enjoy. And I'm excited to hear how Dean would help Laura to shift her mindset, identify what truly brings her fulfillment, and to make a conscious effort to change so she can stop feeling like she has to go to work and start feeling like she gets to go to work. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So Dean, we're going to get into Laura's story here in a bit, but I want to start with your story. So I want you to take me back 16 years ago, more than 16 years ago. You were a regional manager and you were introduced to workforce development by a friend who tricked you into attending a youth council. So what's the story behind that?
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. That's what happened. I'm a high school dropout. I left high school when my oldest son was born. And all I knew in life was how to work hard, not very smart. And I didn't even know what I liked or what I wanted to do. All I knew was that I had to go to work and pay the hospital bill and support my son. So got married a few months later, traveled through life, trying to figure it out, bumps along the way, of course, did a lot of different types of jobs, never really figuring out my path. That developed in me the desire to help other people not have to go through that. And so through a series of professional changes, I ended up at a local staffing agency as a regional manager. And a good friend of mine told me about this youth council thing. And I thought, well, what's that? She goes, well, let's just come with me and show me. I'll show you. So we did. And I was intrigued and started going back. And 6 months later, I was the chair. And that was a subset of this organization that I work for today. It was a standing subcommittee under a different federal regulation because it's a partially federally funded organization. Became the chair. And I still to this day love trying to help youth navigate what life could look like for them.
Wow.
Not always sure I get there, but I sure love trying.
I love it. So, okay, you got me curious so you mentioned you're a high school dropout. So
Yeah.
I guess how do you recommend others who have a similar background where maybe they don't have all those accolades in education to be able to navigate their careers? Because I hear it all the time, and I'm sure you do hear it too. Well, I'm scared to apply to this or go for this because I don't have this degree. I don't have this. How do you recommend people work through that?
It's a great question. There's a couple of different positions I take on it. The first one is if a company only values you for your sheepskin, your degree, they will not value you as a person. So your contribution may not matter. Okay. And that's not 100%, it's not exclusive, but oftentimes that's the case.
Yeah.
The other thing is my position has always been, I outwork everybody. I just have rolled up my sleeves and outworked everybody in my way and proven my value. And I love to learn, right? So just because I didn't get a degree, I didn't sit in a class and learn a lot of these things, most people are pretty shocked when they hear that.
Yeah.
I trained myself through study. YouTube University is a great place to learn, right?
Dean, I say it to people all the time. I said, we are in the greatest age of access to education and what's available. Like, imagine 100 years ago, what it must have been like, for people who wanted to learn something new. It would be impossible. They only had the educational systems that were near their home. They couldn't even travel very far. And of course, there's no such thing as the internet. So what I'm hearing you say is take advantage of the resources that are available to you.
100%. And the wise people in your life, right? I've learned so much from others, observing others. I love to watch people learn from people. And sometimes it's learning what not to do, but oftentimes it's also learning what to do and how to be.
Yeah. So learning from what other people who are doing what you want to be doing.
Correct.
Right. How they got there. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly right. Exactly right.
Well, I'm curious to ask you about the premise of your podcast, right? The All in a Day's Work. You mentioned that society has placed this negativity around work.
Yeah.
The phrasing of, I have to go to work.
Right.
I'll be free on the weekends. Right. Where does that come from? Like, why is that in it? Why do we have this stigma about work?
I wish I knew, Jay. I honestly don't know where that came from. All I know is that it's everywhere around us. I can only kind of guess that it stems from people who are not happy in their jobs. But I believe that 90% of that is your approach, is your attitude, right? It's how you think of it. What do you decide to take pride in? I don't know if you've ever polished an apple before. I grew up polishing apples on a small apple farm. And my dad, 14 years old, teaching me about life by polishing apples. On an October evening, I kid you not. Can I tell the story? Do we have time?
Please. Yeah.
14 years old. Most 14-year-olds kind of have snotty attitudes, right? I did a little bit. So I'm sitting on an overturned bucket across from my dad polishing apples. And I grab and we're going to take them to the store. That's why we're polishing them, right? We just picked them. They're going to the store. So we're sitting in these buckets, terry cloth towel in our hand, polishing apples. And I grab an apple, polish it, put it in the finish box. My dad's polishing an apple. He looks at me and he goes, "Are you done with that?" And I said, "Well, yeah." "Okay." And he keeps polishing his apple. I grab another one, blah, blah, blah. This goes on and on and on 4, 5, 6 times. And I finally said, "Am I doing something wrong, Dad?" He goes, "No, I just think we can do better." So he, meanwhile, is taking my apples out and repolishing them. I didn't get it yet, right? So fast forward to the next day. We get our 6-bushel boxes full of apples, all polished and ready to go to the store. We load them in the back, little blue Mazda pickup, and take them to a little grocery store, which is 10 miles away from our house. And he says, "Hey, would you go find Henry, the store owner, and get the check? He'll have ready for you. And I'll get the apples set up." And this is when every little corner market had a fruit and vegetable area and a meat section, and they had a little bit of everything in them, right?
Mm.
And the owner typically lived in the back of the store. That was the case here. So I went and got the check from Henry, thanked him, not to see Dad. He was finishing up, putting the apples away, and he asked me a question that I'll never forget. "Do you want an apple?" "What? No, Dad, we've got tons of apples at home. Why would you ask me if I want an apple?" He goes, "Well, if you did want an apple, what apple would you take?" And mind you, there were 4 kind of columns of apples. And I said, "Well, probably some of these or one of these. This one right here." I grabbed one. He goes, "Why?" I said, "Well, it's the best looking apple there." He goes, "Right. Those are our apples, son." I didn't know they were our apples. The lesson there was put in the work and it will show. You may not see it right away, but it will show. Our apples sold out every week. We'd come back and refill. Other people's apples were all there. What was the difference? Ours looked better. We put in the work. We outworked all the other apple growers.
Yeah. That's
right?
a great story. I love
Oh,
that
it's
story.
stuck with me. I'm old now. That was a long time ago, but it still sticks with me today.
What a valuable lesson that your father imparted onto you as at a young age.
Yeah.
And I could imagine, right, as people hear that story and they listen to it, they can get inspired to want to put in that extra work, and let's say they do, right, that they say they are working really hard and they are polishing that apple,
Yeah.
yet they still feel that it's something about what they're doing is just not giving them that sense of fulfillment.
Sure.
What else could it be? Like, what else you think could be getting in the way for an individual who feels like their work is not something that they really enjoy?
A number of things. Excuse me. A number of things could be even the industry that they're in. It may not suit well with them. So I'm one who loves to study personality profiles, and I go back to the old school Socrates, right? And there are 4 primary personalities, and each of these primary personalities, we all are a blend, but each of these primaries are our core, and that's what drives us to like things or do things the way
Yeah.
we tend to do them. If we have a particular personality profile that makes us really detailed, we ought to go find detailed type work, right? Architecture, CPA, banker, whatever. I don't know what all that could be, but it could be a number of things. If we have the party mentality called a sanguine, if we have that kind of a personality, we need to go be in front of people. We need to entertain people in a fun, jovial way, right?
Yeah.
If we're phlegmatic, which is actually my personality type, we want to help everybody. We don't want to be in the front. We don't want to lead the pack, but we will lock arm in arm with everybody and work our guts out to help them and all of us succeed. So we're great teammates. Everybody, every one of us on the face of this planet have core personality traits, and we have to figure out, I believe, figuring those out can really help us decide what kind of work we ought to be doing.
Yeah.
And then we can narrow it down to the industry within.
Yeah. I was just having a conversation right before we started recording with someone, and he and I were talking about how all these different personality assessments can be so valuable, but ultimately they all say similar things in different ways.
Yeah.
There's insights discovery, DISC personality profile, what you just mentioned there, the Socrates version of it. We have Myers-Briggs, all these different ones, but ultimately there are the same categories that they oftentimes identify. And it's interesting that you bring this up because, before we were recording, you and I were talking about this a bit more. This is, of course, a story that's related to somebody who I really do know and work with. And this person, ultimately, what we found was that she was misaligned. And the kind of tasks that she was doing were not, it's not that she wasn't good at them. She was great at them. She could do them, but she just wasn't passionate about what she was doing. Right.
Right.
Right. It didn't give her energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so
I
what
see
you're
it
saying is,
happen a lot.
yeah. And what we have to figure out, and personality profile or tests can help us, but ultimately sometimes just taking inventory and being able
Yeah.
to say, well, when I think through my professional experience, what are the activities that give me energy?
Yep. Yep. Yes, all of that. And I'll also add, it's not always about us. There are other
Hmm.
influences in the air quote in the room, right? So
Yeah.
we may have a boss or a coworker or somebody else that we are responsible to for some reason who, for lack of a better term, sucks the life out of us.
Yeah.
And we dread being in the room with that person. That doesn't happen very
Yeah.
often, but sometimes it does.
Yep.
And all of that, in my opinion, observation, and experience, boils down to leadership or a lack thereof. So somebody is
Yeah.
not seeing that dynamic and addressing it. Can you fix it?
I
Sometimes,
yeah.
but not every time.
What I appreciate about how you answered this was you started with the person's attitude, and then after you do that attitude check and that mindset
Right.
check and
Oh,
that
yeah,
personality alignment, then look at the environment secondary.
absolutely. Yeah, I think that for me, that's always the approach. What do you love? What did you hate? Why did you take the job in the first place? Right? What
Right.
motivated you to accept the position? And sometimes it's just
Yeah.
I needed a job. Okay, fair. Do you still need this one? Is there something about this that you no longer enjoy? And what is that? Let's figure that out. Is it you? Is it somebody else? It's something. Let's identify it and then decide how to address it.
Yeah. Well, there's something that I saw on your LinkedIn profile. I'm going to read the quote because I think it is related to what you're discussing here, and I want to ask you to explore it a bit more. You said, I believe my job is to eliminate as much pain from people's professional lives as they are willing to let go of. That
Yeah.
last part got me interested. Talk to me about that.
Well, that goes to both sides of the professional scale. So whether it be me as a person or you as an individual, all the way up through leadership ranks, right? Oftentimes we get in our own way. And we get in our own way in a multitude of reasons, one of which is outside influences. So let's imagine somebody. Oh, let's imagine that somebody's in the insurance industry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and their best friend had a horrible experience with the insurance industry for whatever reason. That person is now negative towards the entire industry, even though Laura had nothing to do with that person's experience.
Mm.
But Laura respects that person, her friend. So her friend's influence on Laura now lowers her respect for her own industry that she worked within. I've seen that happen so many times, and it's unfortunate, but it's reality. So we have to address it, right?
Mm.
If that's the problem, likely you're going to need to go out of the industry because once you're tarnished, fixing that honestly is a real uphill battle. Most people don't have what it takes to do that. I don't know if I have what it takes to do that in most cases. So I
Mm.
can't hold anybody else accountable if I can't do it. The other is honestly, leadership gets in their own way oftentimes. A few years ago, right before the onset of the pandemic, I met with a local organization, long-term company who was having real significant turnover problems. And met with them, talked for, gosh, like 3 hours, listening to them and just visiting with them about the whole thing and their process and everything. At the end of it, they said, okay, well, what do you think the problem is? And my response was, I mean, really? Do you really want to know what I think the problem is? Yes, we do, they said. I said, okay, I think you guys are the problem. They did not want to hear that. They were not ready for that. Didn't expect it. Maybe I was a little too direct. I don't know. But they might still be mad at me, but they fixed a lot of the problems. They've
Well, what
gotten
did
out
you
of their
see were their problem? Like, what were they doing, or what were they not doing?
they were only looking at the end result and not what it took to get to the end result.
Mm.
So one of the challenges that they would repeatedly do, they told me without knowing they were telling me, was they would put people into leadership positions within the organization that didn't want them, for one,
Mhm.
weren't ready for them and gave them no training to become that leader.
Mm.
They just saw a hole and filled the hole. They were the proverbial little Dutch boy with his finger in the dike, right? Holding the water back.
Yeah.
That's all they did. They put people in there. Well, maybe my fingers aren't big enough to plug the hole. I'm not that right person, right? Leadership is a big pill to swallow. Not everybody wants to. And if you don't want to, you shouldn't be forced into it. If you do want to, you need to be given the tools to succeed.
And there also has to be an openness, right? Like for that group of leaders that heard that feedback from you, while I'm sure they didn't like it, right? Who likes to hear that?
Right.
But
right.
but at the same time, it's also the mark of a self-aware and emotionally intelligent leader to be able to hear that, not like it, and still respect the feedback and take it and then try to apply what it is that's being shared with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a big growth opportunity for a lot of us. I'm still there sometimes, right? I mean,
it's interesting, right? I think that even for me, years ago, I could definitely say I was not as open to feedback as I am now. I would definitely get more defensive.
Sure.
And, maybe I would put on the front, right? And hide it and mask it, but I was boiling inside.
Yeah.
And now it's interesting as I watch myself when I do receive constructive feedback, it still comes up. Like I would be lying if I said that it didn't come up, right?
Of course.
But what I'm able to notice is, okay, there it is. It comes up, and this person is coming from a good place, whoever's giving it to me.
Yeah.
And I need to really consider what they're saying. It doesn't mean I absolutely agree with everything they say, nor do I absolutely disagree. Right. It's more of just let it be something that I download, consider, reflect on, and then determine from a non-emotional place,
which is the challenge.
Right? What can I learn from this feedback?
Yes. And my guidance to people, if you're interested, because I got this myself, is flip it. Put yourself in that person who just gave you that feedback shoes.
Yeah.
And offer it up how you would give it to them, the same feedback. How would you deliver it? Right? When we chew on things a little bit like that and we flip them, it's different.
Yeah.
I
oftentimes ask people, I invite them to imagine that they were watching the interaction from a third party.
Yeah.
And then what would be the advice that you would give to either yourself or to the other person if you were just a third party in the room, a fly on the wall, just watching?
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Because something happens, like when we're immersed in it and we're getting that defensive, we don't actually have the full faculties of our entire brain. Like we're shut down in many ways. But when you think about it, like it's a third party and you're looking at it from that perspective, more starts to churn. You have more access and a greater ability to think about it from multiple perspectives.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so one of the things that I'm curious to ask you about, because I know that in your podcast, Alone in a Day's Work, you're bringing on people who really do enjoy what they do. They enjoy their work. They love what they do. So what are the common traits that you see in people who love what they do? What are some of the common themes or the through lines throughout all of them?
Well, the number one thing that I see, it's so funny you bring this up. I literally was recording a podcast this morning, and that topic came up.
Interesting.
From my guest. She asked me, how do you identify people and how do you know that they like their job?
Yeah.
And how did they get there? Right. I said, well, I'm going to ask you that same question, just in a little bit different way. More often than not, I can count on one hand how many people started a career and have loved that career throughout its life. We change, right? People change, and back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago about the what drives us, our personality drives. We may not make it the first time. So finding that, and sometimes it's completely by accident. Mine was completely by accident. I found my career by accident. I did not know it even existed. That happens often. My dad was a career truck driver and loved it and took great pride in it. He took great pride in driving 6 million miles with one accident. That's pretty impressive, right? And he
Yeah.
took pride in it. When he went to work, he dressed in a button-down shirt like I'm wearing right now. His nails were clean. He didn't have a ball cap on. His hair was combed. He wore floor shine shoes to drive a truck in. That showed pride in his profession.
Mm.
So if a person is on the bubble and they're not sure that they hate their job yet or their career, I ask them to approach it a little bit differently and level up their professionalism within that career. Try that for 60, 90 days and see, and let's check back at that point. What's your attitude about it now? I can't think of a time it hasn't been improved. So it's our own mental, we get in our own way, right? And our negative cycling of thought drives the whole process downward into a negative hole.
Yeah. So it's a shift of the frame.
Yeah.
Right? You're shifting your frame and being able to approach your work as I want to be approaching this with 100% of me. I'm taking pride in this.
Yes.
This is important. This is meaningful.
Yes. 100%.
And so we see that, for example, like with Laura, let's say she's making that incremental improvement. You know, what are some of the, so you mentioned, like, for example, like your father, he would dress differently. Like what else do you recommend people to really do? Like specifically, like how would they show up like that more? What would you say, okay, are tactical or specific ways in which strategies even to be able to bring that kind of mindset and attitude to your work every day?
Align with people you respect. Right. So find somebody within the industry, maybe even within the same office, who you look up to, and ask them to mentor you.
Yeah.
Right. Mentors are such a big deal that I don't think we put, myself included, put enough emphasis on the value of mentorship, both to receive and to offer.
Yeah.
Every time I've mentored somebody, I've received more out of it than I've given. I guarantee it.
Oh yeah, I tell people all the time, like as a coach, and I have the honor of coaching professionals all over the world. I feel like I am getting so much out of it, and it's almost like a guilt. Like I'm getting more out of this than they are, and they get great results too. But I feel like it's such a personal development journey for me. To coach others.
Yeah, absolutely. When I work with the business and I help them in get themselves in a better position, I always receive more out of that.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe not financially, but intrinsically.
Intrinsically, that's what I mean. Right. And so what you're saying with the case of, let's say, Laura, is for her to be proactive in giving someone else that opportunity to mentor her, and that exchange alone will help her to improve her attitude towards her work.
Absolutely. I'm a believer that our entire world, our universe, is built on relationships, either good, indifferent, or bad. Right? Yeah. So in the workplace is no different. If we have bad relationships, it sours our view of the workplace. If we have great relationships, it improves the view of our workplace. And if they're indifferent, it actually tends to sour the workplace view.
Yeah.
So foster those relationships. Seek somebody out who you think is good at their job and takes pride in their job and loves their career, and model yourself. Get to know them. Get the relationship built.
Yeah.
Be mentored by them and learn from them why they like it so much.
I think this is powerful to hear, because I think we often underestimate the effects that other people have on us.
Oh, sure.
And the influence that they have on us, because we are social creatures.
Yep.
And as social creatures, if we are around those who are either quite toxic or negative, as much as you say, I'm not going to let them get to me,
you can't avoid it.
You can't avoid it.
Right.
It's just, that's like saying I'm going to walk outside when it's raining and not get wet.
That's like going to a high lake in early summer and say you're not going to get bit by a mosquito. Right? You're going to get bit by a mosquito.
Right. And I'm so glad we're talking about this, because I think it's so often overlooked. And what it's important, of course, to be able to check yourself to make sure that you're not
Sure.
projecting things, right? Of course not. But
Right.
if you can clearly recognize that, hey, the people that I'm surrounded by are incredibly negative and very toxic, and you can find a way to put yourself into a different room and then connect
Mhm.
with someone who is more of a mentor and you can learn from, that alone can completely shift your attitude and mindset.
Absolutely. I've seen it happen time and time again. I've
Yeah.
experienced it personally,
Yeah.
right? When I've been in a room where, man, it just feels thick, right? The air is just thick with whatever, just dislike. And you get out of that room and into another room and it's a different vibe,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's palpable. You really feel it.
Yes.
And I noticed it early in my career, I remember I was in a finance company, and even just somebody who would walk into the hall, like, so I was sitting in one of those cubicles, right?
Uh-huh.
And so like I'd be working whatever, and just the person who walked by me because I was at the
Yeah.
aisle, right? Their energy would,
Yep.
I'd feel it. I noticed it. I'm like, oh my God, like this one girl would walk by. She was so positive, energetic, and you
Yes.
felt it when she walked
Yes.
in. And then you see somebody else drudging, like
The
that, drudging
Eeyore,
along.
right?
Right. And you feel that too.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Yeah.
ones that crack me up are the Eeyores that don't know they're Eeyores that frown at the Tiggers of the world, right? They scoff at him. The first time I see somebody scoff at somebody that's like you described, the happy, outgoing, bubbly personality person, when I see somebody scoff at them,
Yeah.
I wanna know what's going on in their world because it's just not great, typically.
Yeah. It's not great. And if you're in a position of leadership and you can coach that person, great. But if it's someone who's a colleague, then you
Yeah.
want to be sure that you're not spending too much time around the Eeyore. You want to,
Yes.
yeah, you want to be
That's
careful.
an interesting thing you just brought up, if we could go down that path for just a minute.
Sure.
Leadership is not always connected to a title,
Right. Of
right?
course. Yeah.
I don't have I guess I do have a title of leadership here as the director of business services. However, I'm not the leader. I'm a
Mhm.
leader. And when I see somebody equal to me or technically above me and they have a need, I can't help myself. I have to go help them.
Mhm.
And I hesitate to say this because I feel like I'm patting myself on the shoulder a little bit, but I want other people to know that that's okay. You
Yeah.
can lead from any seat you sit in
Yeah.
if you want to.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the definition of leadership that I often refer to is, a person of influence is a leader, right? A leader is
Yes.
a person of influence. And so that doesn't necessarily require a title. It doesn't
Nope.
necessarily require you to have, direct reports under you. And all of us are people of influence in different scenarios.
Right.
And so in the event that you can help somebody like that, then of
Yes.
course, go ahead and do your best.
Don't
What I
absorb
often
their
find,
energy.
right. But that's where it becomes a challenge, right, Dean?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
while we intend to help someone, if that person is open and willing, then it could go really well.
Yeah.
If they aren't, then you do your best and you have to move on, so
Absolutely.
that, yeah, so that you don't get caught in their spiral, or in the hole that they've dug within themselves. And so
Yeah.
it's a fine line, and you need to be just, because the way I look at compassion is, compassion means I am compassionate to you and I'm going to do what I can to help and understand your
As a
perspective
human being, yes.
as a human being, and I'm going to be compassionate to me as
Yeah.
well in that same exchange.
Definitely a two-way thing.
Yeah, right. And if it means I have to remove myself from this scenario because I feel like it's starting to be harmful towards me, that's the decision I have to make.
Yeah.
But every scenario will be different. And so,
Certainly.
speaking of that kind of exchange, what happens in Laura's story, and it happens to a lot of people that I talk with, is, she gets that notification of that LinkedIn post,
Yeah.
and in it she sees a former colleague celebrating, and she's falling into that comparison, and she's saying, well, why don't I have that?
Right.
How do you recommend people work through that common pitfall?
Well, yeah, it is common, actually.
Yeah.
I've actually experienced that myself a little bit in years past.
Yeah.
And I love to sit and talk with people about that kind of a situation and ask them what they think is keeping them from having that.
Hmm.
Why do you think you don't? Do you not deserve it? Why don't you
Yeah.
deserve it if you think that? If you do deserve it, why don't you have it? Have you not done what it takes to get it? Ask a lot of really hard questions that are very simple, right? But they're hard to answer because usually they make people look inside. And we don't always want to do that.
And take ownership.
You have to. Once you verbalize it to somebody face to face, look me in the eyes and tell me I haven't taken the steps it's going to take to get that done. Now you have to,
Yeah.
right? If
Right.
you want me to
Because
continue with you, you have to.
it's a lot easier to not take ownership. It's a lot easier to not take responsibility. And so I think, and I want to, of course, be considerate and compassionate towards people who fall into this pattern, because I've been there
Sure.
too. We're often not conscious that we're doing it,
Right.
right? We're not even aware that we haven't yet taken ownership. But when someone poses a question like that, that sometimes wakes us up.
Right. And it's instantaneous almost. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's like, oh, wow. He called me out.
it's a zinger.
Yeah. Yeah. But we need to be zinged at times. We need
We
to be woken
do.
up.
We
Yeah.
do. And if you do it, I've found that if I've been in that position and I've zinged somebody with true kindness in my heart and wanting them to have a better life, it's received pretty well,
Yeah.
even
I
with the
hear
zing.
you. I hear you. It's what's fueling the activity.
Yeah.
And
What's my
I can sense in
motivation?
you, right? I can sense in you, Dean, you're fueled by genuinely wanting to help the other
Absolutely.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
That's
not
how
about
I get
you.
fueled. I get fueled
Yeah.
by seeing other people's success that I've helped to influence. Is that
Right.
greedy? Yeah, probably a little bit greedy, I guess, for my own self-gratification, but I'm not gonna change that. It's what
Yeah.
helps me do what I do.
Yeah, but if I could, even if that's the case, I could still feel that you really wish to help, and that's what
Thank you.
makes all the difference, right?
Thank you.
Even if you get something out of it, hey, that's okay too, right?
The
Both things
bonus,
can be
right?
true, right? Yeah, a nice byproduct. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
that leads me to ask you, considering how I think that if, let's say, Laura had an opportunity to speak with you, I think that you would be able to really guide her effectively. So let's say, Laura listened to your podcast and she
Yeah.
heard what you were discussing on one of the episodes and felt like she wanted to reach out to you, and she
Yeah.
does through LinkedIn, let's say, and then you
Yeah.
have a conversation and she tells you her story and what she's going through, and rather than you just vomiting a bunch of advice, you would pose a question, Dean. I know
Yeah.
you would.
Yeah.
What would be the first thing you'd ask her? What would you ask her to evoke something within her?
Well, first I'd wanna know, I mean, some very, very basics. How long
Yeah.
have you been doing it? Did you start this position or work into this position? Because
Hmm.
that matters as well, right?
Yeah.
At what point in your day do you start feeling like you don't love being there? Is it before you get
Mm,
there? Is it mid-morning? Is it afternoon? Is it after lunch? Because sometimes it's a physical thing and not emotional alone. I gotta ask all these questions to get to know really what's going on in that person.
yeah.
If I find that it's them, I've gotta call it out. If I find that it's somebody else, I've gotta plant seeds. I'm not gonna call
Yeah.
somebody else out who I have not had the opportunity to talk with, but I will plant seeds. And
Yeah.
sometimes those seeds are very simply, is this person influences you somebody that you absolutely have to be around all the time? Or can you move your cube potentially so you don't have to listen to the way John eats? Sometimes it's little things and we don't
Oh
even know,
yeah. Oh
right?
yeah. And I like the way you broke that down, and helping someone to be able to clearly identify from their experience
Yeah,
what could be the factors in play here
right.
versus just theoretical. It's like, well, tell me about specifically in your day when you start to feel this.
Yeah,
What is the cause effect? And can we go back to find out what the pattern is that leads you feeling the way you do? And you're
yeah,
right. Sometimes it is small things. I mean,
right,
sometimes it's just because a person sits for hours and doesn't get up and
right,
doesn't move their physical body. Like,
right.
it's amazing how often these things get overlooked. And
It's
what happens
huge.
is, Dean, is that the person then goes, well, it's this company They're the big problem.
Right.
They then quit, go somewhere else, and guess what? 3 months later, they have the same exact
problem. Yeah, Jay, you're spot on.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I asked the history.
Yeah.
Right? If they say I've been here a year, well, what did you do before? And what was it like then? I'm looking for repeats, right? Repeat problems. That tells me more about who the problem is or might be.
Yeah.
And then we can have that conversation.
Yeah.
And if I do it with love in my heart, more often than not, it's pretty well received.
I love it. I love it, Dean. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time to chat with me and to go through Laura's story. And for anyone listening, please reach out to Dean on LinkedIn, follow his content. It's Dean Craig, Craig. And then the website where people can learn more is willwp.org. And I even think that the link to your podcast is right through
in
that
there.
website.
Yep.
Yeah. That's where I saw some of the information there. So go ahead, check Dean out. Dean, thanks again, my friend, for sharing your wisdom with us. This was such a fun conversation.
Thank you, Jay. This was an honor and a privilege. I appreciate you.
As I listened back to that conversation I had with Dean, I could really sense how genuine he is in wanting to help others. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted him on the podcast. I could feel it, and hopefully you felt it too. And I'm going to break down the insights and the actionable takeaways from our conversation. So here are the 3 insights. The first one is to take pride in your work. Even if it's just to have that for yourself, to know that you are working hard because that's a value of yours. I love the story of the polishing apples that he shared and how he learned that lesson at a young age to take pride in one's work and to recognize that there is meaning behind it. The second insight was attitude first, alignment second, environment third. So if we're feeling a bit stuck, we're not really excited about our work, first let's check our attitude. What's our mindset around our work? Then let's look at alignment. Is there a personality issue there where we're not really thriving because we're doing things that don't align with our personality? And then third is the environment, which is what are the influences around us? I like that order of things because it suggests that we have to look at ourselves first before we go out and look at the world around us. Third insight, we change. Throughout years of our career, we're going to change. What fulfills you now will be different than what fulfilled you 5 or 10 years ago, and it's going to change again in the future. So we need to be willing to have that flexibility and to adapt according to where we're at in our lives. It's not always going to be the same. Here are 3 actionable takeaways from today's conversation. The first one is to take ownership. I love how when I posed that question to him around Laura falling into that comparison, or why don't I feel this way, or why don't I have this, he brought it back to, well, you can have it. Why don't you? What are you doing about it? And so often we fall into that pattern unconsciously of looking out into the world and blaming the world around us. But let's put that mirror up and take ownership, take full responsibility of where we're at. The second actionable takeaway, align with people you respect. Find mentors. Surround yourself with those kind of positive influences. And I love how he phrased this, that our world is built by relationships, and we need to foster healthy relationships. Third actionable takeaway, identify the true cause. Identify the true cause. Rather than letting it be this idea you have in your head around why you're not happy with your work, and it's just this theory you've created, and believing the initial thoughts around it, go into the actual cause-effect relationship. Really go through the history the way Dean was suggesting. Identify the real triggers and the factors there. And if you can look at how your days are progressing and what's potentially causing it, then you can look at the root cause of it and fix it, versus running to, let's say, the next job or seeking out new employment or starting something on your own, where you're bringing all the same factors with you into the next opportunity. Join us on Friday. I'm going to be diving into the specifics on how do you actually go about finding a mentor and what that conversation could sound like. I think too often what I'm hearing is that people know that that's something valuable to them, but when I really ask them about it, they just don't know how to do it. They just feel a little unsure, insecure about what are the steps that one would take. How would you reach out to that person? What would you ask in the conversation? And how would you then get that person interested in mentoring you? I think that there are certain steps that one can take. And I'm going to explain that in our Friday podcast episode, where I'll break down exactly what that conversation can sound like. So you have the specific steps that will allow for you to be able to enact that versus it being something that's just sounds good and you know you should do. Let's actually make that happen. So until next time, thank you so much for listening.